16-year-old Mia Chen stood in the dusty lot behind the high desert livestock auction with exactly $47 in her pocket. Two battered 20s folded small, a 5, and two ones that had been birthday money from her grandmother. It was every cent she owned, and she had driven 2 hours in a borrowed car to spend it on something every member of her family would have called foolish. The plan was simple and stubborn. Buy a horse nobody else wanted, one that had been priced for the slaughter truck and was hours away from being loaded and shipped across the border to be killed, because slaughtering horses on American soil was illegal, but transporting them for slaughter elsewhere was not. 3 months earlier, reading for a school project about animal welfare, she'd learned about kill buyers who purchase horses by the pound, sometimes paying as little as 30 or 40 cents per pound, loading them into trailers and sending them to slaughter facilities. Those buyers took old animals, lame animals, sick animals, horses whose owners could no longer afford them or who no longer wanted them. Horses that had spent years serving people and suddenly were worth more dead than alive. Just knowing this made Mia physically sick, and she had promised herself that as soon as any money was available, she would go to an auction and save at least one life. The auction looked exactly as imagined. Weathered barns and metal pipe corrals stretching under a harsh sky, horses crowded into pens and waiting their turn in the sale ring. Most of the animals would be bought by ordinary horse people hunting for a bargain, but the pens in the back told another story. Those stalls, marked with bright orange tags on the halters, held kill pen horses already sold to buyers who planned to haul them off. Dozens stood in those rear corrals, some still alert and proud despite everything, others with heads hanging low, eyes dull, bodies turned inward by whatever streak of misfortune had carried them there. Quarter horses, paints, thoroughbreds, draft crosses, and ponies were all mixed together with no mercy. If the animal had 4 hooves and no one wanted it, it could end up in that line. With $47 and kill buyers paying by weight at 30 to 40 cents a pound, Mia's math meant she could only buy maybe one small pony. She could not rescue a big horse or a young one that would weigh more. She could only afford something small, old, and dismissed by everyone else as worthless. She paced the kill pen rails, looking at each animal, weighing choices with the stubborn logic of someone who had run the numbers on the drive to the auction and refused to be swayed. A bay mare with swollen knees glanced up as she passed. A pinto gelding with a scarred face turned its head away. A palomino with a pronounced limp stood in the corner. They all deserved saving, and each made the choice harder because only one life could be spared. As she walked, something in the very back corner stopped her. There lay a gelding so old that his muzzle was silver and his spine seemed to fold under the weight of years. His coat was a muddled dark, hidden beneath layers of dust and neglect. Every rib showed, hip bones jutted sharply in that skeletal silhouette everyone who reads about starvation knows to identify. His head hung so low that his nose almost touched the ground, and his eyes were half closed as if resignation had taken him long ago. He seemed like the most surrendered creature she'd ever seen. Yet, under matted mane and grime, there was a faded frieze brand on his neck, white letters and numbers that signaled official identification, the kind used for horses with registered value. This emaciated, abandoned gelding in the kill pen had once been important enough to be permanently marked. Without thinking about rules or warnings, Mia climbed through the corral rails and approached the horse. He didn't lift his head at first. She laid a careful hand on his neck and felt bones so near the surface the skin seemed like paper stretched over an old skeleton. "Hey, old man, nobody's looking at you, are they? Everyone's walking past like you're already dead," she whispered, and the horse's ear twitched toward the voice, the first sign he managed to field from the world that day. Fingers brushed away a grime-clotted section of mane and revealed more of the frieze brand. Faded but readable, a string of letters and numbers that meant there was a registry somewhere with his history recorded. Someone had given him a name and a life once. Mia talked to him the way people do when they feel compelled to promise things out loud. She didn't have a lot, she told the horse through tears, but what she had was his if he wanted it. She told him she could not save every animal in the lot, but she could try to save him. The gelding lifted his head a fraction, his eyes clouded with age, but flicking a faint spark of recognition toward her offer, as if he somehow registered the possibility of being spared. Mia went to find the auction official in charge of the kill pens, a world-weary man who had worked these sales so long his face had learned to keep the sorrow at a distance. The bay gelding in pen 6, the really old one in the back. She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The official checked his list. That one came in as a bulk lot. Nobody claimed him, he said. The paperwork suggested abandonment. The kill buyer had tagged him already, so technically the buy belonged to that buyer. The girl would have to purchase him from the kill buyer. Could she ask? The official's eyes took her in, young, determined, teary. He warned her bluntly that the horse was probably 25 to 30 years old, with perhaps a year of life left if the bones and heart were kind. "You're better off spending that money on something with a future," he said, not unkindly. But Mia insisted anyway. He went to speak with the men handling the load, and Mia watched as a dirty, stained hand passed a wad of cash to a man in a sweat-darkened cowboy hat. The official returned and relayed the offer. $40, the kill buyer said, and the gelding would be hers. The buyer wanted to avoid the transport costs and pen fees for an animal that old. No health papers, no refunds, no guarantees, purchase as is. "I'll take him," Mia said at once, fingers fumbling two 20s from her pocket. Could the official hold an extra $7 for gas? That little detail mattered to her because she had no trailer and needed the money to get the horse home. The official agreed to hold the $7 and asked a practical question that Mia had not considered. What about a trailer? Realizing she'd focused only on the cash and not on transport made her stomach drop. She had a borrowed car but not a trailer, and buying a horse without a plan for getting it home would be useless. The scene seemed poised to end with Mia surrendering and walking away when a woman in her 40s with sun-streaked hair and a calm, work-worn face stepped forward. "I've got a trailer. I can haul him if he's not going too far," the woman said. She introduced herself as Margaret Riley and explained that she ran a small rescue about 90 minutes north and came to auctions sometimes to pull horses when funds and space allowed. She had seen Mia with the gelding and offered to take him if his home was on her way. Miraculously, when given the girl's address, it turned out to be only 30 minutes out of Margaret's route. They agreed to meet at the loading area after Margaret finished bidding on 2 horses she hoped to rescue. In the hour they waited, Mia sat in pen 6 with the old gelding, running her hands through his matted coat, talking to him and pressing a desperate tenderness into the limited time she had before transport. In her head she'd named him Phoenix, a symbolic hope that the animal would rise one more time from the ashes of neglect. She admitted quietly to the horse that she had never owned a horse before, that her parents would likely be furious, and that they only had 5 acres and a run-in shed, but she had been studying horse care for months and had a neighbor who knew horses. Her words were promises and a plan. She'd figure it out. When Margaret returned with her trailer, loading Phoenix was painful to watch. The old gelding barely walked, steps staggered, and every move looked as if it caused him discomfort. It took nearly 15 minutes of gentle coaxing, shared strength and close support from Margaret and Mia until they could get him up the ramp and secure inside the trailer. When he finally stood there, breathing hard, the relief felt intense and fragile all at once. Margaret warned bluntly that the horse was in rough shape and needed a veterinarian immediately. Worming, vaccinations, hoof care, a full health evaluation, and possibly long-term therapy for chronic conditions. Mia replied with all the courage that grief and resolve can produce, promising that she would do whatever it took. The 2-hour drive back was a tense procession, Mia following Margaret's trailer and praying Phoenix would survive the trip and that her parents would respond with something better than fury. They arrived to a reaction Mia had dreaded. Her mother in the garden froze when she saw the trailer, then moved through bafflement to anger and finally to a raw, helpless concern when Phoenix emerged into daylight. The horse looked like little more than a walking skeleton cloaked in hide. Seeing him in the bright yard made the auction image pale in comparison. The mother's face shifted into action rather than punishment. She told them to get the horse into the paddock and called the local veterinarian, Dr. Benjamin Harrison, immediately. Dr. Harrison arrived within an hour, having cleared his schedule upon hearing the urgent description. He examined Phoenix thoroughly and delivered a series of clinical conclusions. An estimated age of 27 to 30 years by dental assessment, severe malnutrition and prolonged neglect, chronic arthritis in the hocks, a heart murmur pointing to cardiovascular concerns, hooves in terrible condition, parasites, skin problems, and probable vitamin deficiencies. When asked bluntly if the gelding could recover, the vet responded with the guarded truth. There were no guarantees given such advanced age and long-term neglect, but selective, careful care could give the horse a chance. Refeeding needed to be cautious to avoid fatal complications. Dental work and hoof care would have to proceed slowly, and sedation for certain procedures would be risky. If someone was prepared to commit to intensive care for months and to accept the possibility of failing despite doing everything correctly, then there was a chance. Mia accepted that condition without hesitation, even though her own confidence did not match the words she offered. Dr. Harrison left a long list of instructions and medications. Margaret hugged that small, determined girl and promised to check in, then departed. Mia spent the night in the paddock with Phoenix, feeding him tiny, careful meals, watching him eat, and listening to the fragile rumble of a heartbeat beneath her cheek as she pressed against his shoulder. She searched Phoenix's barely legible Freeze brand online and sent queries to registries, wondering if the horse had a name once and who might remember him. Over the following days, phone messages came back. The American Quarter Horse Association replied with a registration file that changed everything. The brand traced to a horse registered 25 years earlier under the name Midnight Maverick. He wasn't just a farm horse. He had been a champion, a national-level reining competitor with wins, titles, and more than $250,000 in prize earnings. He'd been trained by a well-known trainer, Robert Callahan, and owned by a woman named Patricia Morrison, purchased initially as a high-value prospect for tens of thousands of dollars. Photographs from his prime showed a powerful, intelligent dark bay gelding, coiled muscle and precise movement, a horse that had been celebrated in the reining circuit and featured in magazines and training videos. The contrast between those images and the emaciated old animal in the paddock was shocking. Research into his history revealed that after a peak competitive career, he had been sold to a breeding program in the mid-2000s where his value depended on his status as a stallion. Somewhere after 2005, the records hinted he had been gelded, a decision that would have immediately erased most of his breeding value, and his trail grew cold. Ownership likely changed hands several times after that, each transfer reducing both his monetary worth and the attention paid to him, until he ended up abandoned and headed for slaughter. Mia printed the glossy photos from the association and taped them in Phoenix's paddock so she could look at how he had been and how he now was, and she fed him small frequent meals, medicated him as instructed, groomed him, cleaned his wounds, and talked to him constantly about his former life as if speaking the truth out loud could somehow help memory or mood. The horse's demeanor slowly shifted, his eyes brightened, his head came up more often. Where he had once stood quiet in a corner, he now met the gate when Mia approached and sometimes nickered on hearing her voice. The body responded to food and care, incremental weight gain, better coat quality, and stronger interest in surroundings. 3 months after the rescue, Dr. Harrison performed a follow-up that took him by surprise. Where he had once given the gelding maybe a 10% chance of significant recovery, he now admitted Phoenix had gained substantial weight, roughly 180 pounds, with ribs less visible and hip bones no longer prominent. The coat had developed into a rich dark bay with black points, matching the photos of Midnight Maverick. Movement had improved too. Though arthritis remained, the unsteady, wobbly walk had been replaced by a stride with more purpose and power than expected. Tentatively, the veterinarian allowed very light riding, only walking work and extremely cautious trotting if the horse showed comfort. The idea of mounting a 30-year-old former slaughter pen horse would have seemed impossible months earlier, but with the neighbor Mr. Peterson standing nearby for safety, Mia sat for the first time and asked Phoenix to walk. The gelding took 3 cautious steps and old training surfaced. His response to subtle cues, the way he shifted weight and positioned hindquarters, suggested muscle memory tucked under years of neglect waiting for a chance to re-emerge. Over weeks of 15-minute sessions every other day, always gentle and attentive to signs of pain, Phoenix moved through basic exercises. The changes were small but irrefutable. His movement smoothed, his responsiveness sharpened, and his spirit lifted, as if remembering there had been a life of precision and applause. Mr. Peterson, who had trained reining horses, watched a session and could not hide his astonishment. He recognized the riding cues, the set of Phoenix's steps, and the positioning that marked a practiced show horse. "That horse still has reining training under that dust," he said. The idea of returning a 30-year-old, once near-death horse to any kind of public performance seemed outrageous, but Mia recognized something essential. This wasn't about competition or prize money, it was about memory and dignity. A local horse show advertised a vintage horse exhibition class, a non-competitive demonstration for horses over 20 years old that showcased history rather than medals. Mia entered Phoenix as Phoenix Midnight Maverick and described him in the notes. A 30-year-old former national reining champion rescued from a kill pen and returned to the ring for the first time in 2 decades. Organizers were skeptical at first and asked for proof. Mia sent images of the Freeze brand and registration documents, links to old competition footage, and current recovery photos. Within hours, the event organizers responded with an unexpected offer. They wanted to spotlight Phoenix as a special exhibition during the show's intermission, telling his story to center the value of senior horses and highlight the tragedy of the slaughter pipeline. What had been a private plan to show him to a handful of people became a larger stage. Mia's mother worried about the stress and the risk of undoing months of progress, but they made provisions and agreed to stop at any sign of trouble. The day of the show, the trailer ride felt like a walk down memory lane for a horse whose prime had been spent under big lights. When Mia led Phoenix into the stabled area at the covered arena, older competitors and trainers recognized him almost immediately. Whispers spread, "Is that really Midnight Maverick?" One man who had seen him compete in 2001 approached and said he remembered the horse's performance at the World Show. The story of a $40 rescue traveling back to a ring where he once earned glory attracted attention fast. Before the exhibition, someone found Robert Callahan's contact and called him. The trainer, who had once trained Midnight Maverick from a young horse, arrived at the gate with tears on his face. "He was the best I rode," Callahan said, placing his hands on the gelding's face with a reverence that made the arena feel smaller and more human. Phoenix studied him for a beat and then bowed his head until his forehead rested against Callahan's chest, as if making a final, gentle connection across decades of separation. The announcer told Phoenix's history in the ring, and the crowd listened as screens showed side-by-side images of the horse in his prime and his early rescue photos. Then the girl who had bought a dying horse with her grandmother's birthday money led him into center stage. The crowd welcomed them with a kindness that filled the arena. Mia walked Phoenix around slowly, and moved by a moment that felt both reckless and right, she asked for a spin, a basic reining maneuver that the horse had done countless times long ago. The turn was not dramatic or fast, but it was correct. Phoenix planted his inside hind leg and rotated in a controlled pivot, completing a full rotation before being asked to stop. For 3 stunned seconds, the arena went silent and then erupted into thunderous applause. Spectators stood and cheered at the sight of an old horse, remembering what he had been taught 2 decades earlier. That spin, simple and precise, signaled more than physical movement. It was a reclamation of identity. After the exhibition, the crowd pressed around the stall. Photographers sought pictures and older competitors shared stories about watching Midnight Maverick in his prime. Patricia Morrison, the owner who had once purchased the horse for breeding and lost track of him years ago, arrived at the arena in tears. She had mourned him privately, believing him gone. Seeing him alive and safe brought closure and a torrent of gratitude. Patricia insisted on writing a check for $5,000 to cover Phoenix's care for the rest of his life. She said it was the least owed to a horse who had given so much. The video of Phoenix's spin spread online within 24 hours. News outlets picked up the story, and the American Quarter Horse Association featured the horse and the rescue in their newsletter. Animal welfare groups used the image of a champion reduced to $40 in a kill pen to highlight the cruelty of equating animal worth with price per pound. A small act by a determined teenager with $47 became a national conversation about how animals that serve humans can be discarded and how value can be reclaimed with care and attention. 6 months after buying Phoenix, the horse had transformed from near skeleton to a dignified elder, comfortable, groomed, and content. He would never return to the competitive level of his youth, but he had regained enough health and spirit to be seen and to remind people that dignity cannot be priced. Mia learned that worth is not measured by age, looks, or the tally in a buyer's hand. It is counted in the lives animals have lived and the memories they carry. The $5,000 Patricia provided became the seed for a small fund to rescue other horses from the kill pen. It could not save every animal condemned by neglect or indifference, but it made a difference for some, and it proved that even a $40 purchase and a stubborn teenager's determination could rewrite an ending once thought fixed. Phoenix's recovery taught a larger lesson. Every animal in a pen has a history and a value that transcends weight and dollars. Some of those lives will be saved by strangers who show up with little money and a lot of resolve. Some will be remembered by former owners who thought they had lost them forever. Some will become symbols that change minds about senior care and the cruelty of slaughter. Phoenix lived the rest of his days with dignity and attention, a testament to the idea that compassion can be the most effective rescue plan. If this story moved the listener, please do one simple thing. Like the video, share it with someone who cares about second chances, and subscribe so more stories of quiet compassion and unlikely rescues can reach people who will act on them.